It's a wonderful thing that the Turnbull Library is 100 years old. Every year, between 300 and 500 individuals, community groups, organisations gift things to the Turnbull Library. We've got a century of trust behind us, a century of gifting, a century of researchers who have used the collections and generated new knowledge.
Well, the ATL has been an absolute treasure house. It's a world-class institution. For a historian, it's absolutely irreplaceable.
Well, today I've brought out Joanna Turnbull's autograph album. So this is a fantastic collection item in the manuscripts collection. Joanna Turnbull is Alexander Turnbull's sister, fondly known as Sissy to the family and all of their correspondence. I love being able to work with researchers on a really wide variety of topics, bringing that sparkle to the reading room and helping people discover things that are really significant both historically and personally.
But that other folder you brought me, there's this lovely piece where he gives a speech in Christchurch in July 1887, and he writes to his wife to thank her for the note she sent him. That's Mary Vogel, there she is there. Then later he says, I made a rattling good speech.
Oh, fantastic.
I've never seen that quote in any women's suffrage book, so that's new. It's wonderful to have.
These papers are 130 years old, and yet researchers are still able to find new discoveries and bring new meaning to the collections.
So this is Scott's expedition to the Antarctic, 1910, the Terra Nova British Antarctic expedition. This is the dog party in the dog camp with the horses. And this is the relief party here.
This is a painting by Peter McIntyre, and it shows the Turnbull house. So this is the origins, this is where we all started. Officially became the Turnbull Library in 1920 when it opened to the public. Beautiful image here of a family together, beautiful details on the dresses, what they're wearing. We digitised the original glass plate negative and process it from being a negative into a positive.
Alexander Turnbull was a wealthy young guy. He had two big passions in his life. One was yachting. His other great passion was he was an obsessive collector. He was focused on two things mainly, anything to do with New Zealand and the Pacific exploration.
We have a lot of items here belonging to Māori, Tangata Whenua, and the Pacific as well. And people can just sort of type in a search, and if they find something like I did last night, then yeah, we want to see it. It made me feel really emotional because it involves my uncle who's no longer alive. He was a part of a performing arts group, and they were performing all over. They went to Germany, they went to England, and he used to always tell us these stories. And sadly, when you're young, you don't realise how important those stories are.
Mary McIntyre painted this portrait of Pat Hanley, and what's also quite amazing about it is that there's a very beautifully rendered detail of a painting by Tony Thomason in the lower right-hand corner. Well, to me personally, the Turnbull Library published a series of prints after famous New Zealand watercolours in its collection in the 60s. And I grew up with Charles Heafy's beautiful watercolour Mount Egmont from the Southwood on my bedroom wall. Many, many years later, to be looking after the real thing is just such a privilege.
I think what's very satisfying about the job is that working with labels like Flying Nun, by digitising that material, it actually allows it to be used again. It allows it to be remastered and reissued, or in some cases issued for the first time.
So I am a digital archivist here at the Alexander Turnbull Library, and part of my job involves getting files off really old kinds of media. So use an old internal floppy disk drive from a computer to try and image this disk. So part of our job is about having to hook up old technology with modern technology, because of course when we're talking digital archives, we're talking digital files that were being used up to 30 years ago. You really, really have to fix things often. Yeah, it's really fun. Why doesn't it sound fun?
It was never a dull moment, I wouldn't think, being a rare books curator. This is one of the library's copies of the Aurora Australis. So this is the first book to be printed, illustrated, and bound in Antarctica by Ernest Shackleton and members of his crew. I show the binding first because this is made from recycled packing crates. We think they printed about 100 copies, and I'm pretty sure this is the etching press.
We present the Alex Lindsey String Orchestra, conducted by Dobbs Franks, leader Ruth Pearl.
Old recordings of New Zealand music are probably where my interests lie, yes. One of the interesting things about this work is that we don't know exactly what's on the tape until we put it on the machine. The huge variety of the content that I deal with, people telling their stories and old music recordings, primary historical sources. These tapes were recorded 60 years ago, and the sound on them is as clear as the day it was recorded.
This work was written by Bartok in 1935 at the request of...
We've also got the radio presentation, which is historically interesting in itself, the voices of the old YC announcers.
I did a history degree, and so I loved coming here to find out more about what I was researching. You always discover something unexpected. I was researching this woman named Harriet Morrison, who was involved in the suffrage movement, but she isn't mentioned nearly as much as someone like Kate Shepherd. So I came to the ATL, where I could look through all these newspapers and manuscript files, and I could draw out all these amazing cartoons of Harriet Morrison from the newspapers. And then we compiled all that information into this little documentary about Harriet Morrison, which went on to be nominated for the Burt Roth History Awards. And the Burt Roth files we actually used in the project. You know, these were the files that had all this information about her. So it was a really cool way to engage with the archives.
I love this sculpture. I'm a trustee on the Alexander Turnbull Library Endowment Trust, which is a foundation that's been set up in order to make sure that the collection at the Alexander Turnbull Library is available to all New Zealanders. Not only did Kate Shepherd campaign for women's right to vote, but for universal suffrage.
Our means of preservation is to digitise the analogue object for all time. This is a lacquer disc. You can see crazing on this record. Physically, I'm not going to do anything to it, but by playing the content, we preserve it into the future. This has been requested by the great-granddaughter of the bagpipe player.
My name is Carolina Itza, and I have a studio in New Zealand called Studio Carolina Itza. It's a unique works that has the label in paper, fragment of a label, paper work attached to the surface. So this painting is painted over a cardboard, a poor material, and doesn't seem has a priming underneath, but it's still searching about. Through the microscope, I was able to see that it was varnish. Recently, I don't think it was original varnish, because, for example, where there were fragments of paper and where the paper was missing, there was no varnish. So you know that that was something I'm exploring, the possibility there was the label was actually attached at the time the painting was completed. I noticed that the environment where the painting was done had some kind of a dust problem because there's a lots of pigment used that has imbibed. Very beautiful looking under the microscope.
So this is a box of books that were donated last year from the descendants of a man called Charles Calvert. So this was his private library collection. But they've been quite badly damaged by silt. This is actually a book in Māori, 1848. I'm going to be chipping these accretions of silt off using a scalpel and then working through the pages with a very soft brush and a smoke sponge. I quite like the problem solving when you have things come to you and they're sort of not usable as books anymore. Figuring out how to make them meet present day kind of needs for access and use, but still retaining what it is about their history, which is important to what they are.
We're looking at a 35mm master microfilm of the Turnbull times from 1953 to 1954. This is an old acetate film, and I'm going through it to replace poor splices and replacing them with archival splices. And this will help to preserve the microfilm for longer.
My dearest, my own darling. Beautiful. I've got the letters that were written by Peter Howden to his wife, which he wrote every day of his war service from the end of 1915 until he died in 1917. So it's a great love story.
Effectively a passport which allowed Robin Hyde, the New Zealand writer, to travel in China in the 1930s.
Robin Hyde was a pen name and her real name was Iris Wilkinson.
Oh, it's a handmade postcard by the New Zealand artist Frances Hodgkins, essentially a thank you card to thank somebody for having her to stay when she was in France, and probably from the 1930s and 1940s. One of the reasons we liked it so much was that it's quite a rare instance of her work in our collection. We don't know who the artist is, but we know the association of it with a particular voyage.
Look at that.
He's trying to encapsulate the history of New Zealand in one great big sheet.
Well, the history of New Zealand from European
His point of view, yes.
First sight, if you like.
Yes, from his point of view, that's right.
Yes.
I just love this item. I love the fact that all of this is done by hand.
All by hand.
It's remarkable.
te whānau a hone Scott, tēnā koutou I o koutou manaakitanga me te aroha. Nā reira, nau mai, haere mai, ki tō tātou whare. Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou. Kia ora tātou katoa.
I absolutely believe that every New Zealander has the right to expect that the documentary record of their family, their community, their culture, their country is kept, cared for, and made available when they want it or when their descendants want it. That's what this is all about.